first speaker today, though, is Dean Shih-Fu Chang, and it's my pleasure to introduce him, and he'll have a few remarks about engineering in the event. Shih-Fu.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Shih-Fu Chang, Dean of Columbia Engineering School, and it's really wonderful to welcome everyone here in this beautiful room. Actually, we were intentionally not to open this curtain because the view outside is so gorgeous, the whole campus. So later on, you can take a peek of the whole campus, and we are preparing for the commencement, which will be about 10 days from now. Probably 50,000 people were wearing their cap and gown, celebrating the completion of a study. It's the most rewarding event in academia, seeing our students succeed in completing their study here. So today's event is in collaboration with the Simon Institute for Theory of Computing, and also NSF ARIE, which stands for Artificial Intelligence and Natural Intelligence Collaboration. And this is one of the NSF Institute of AI, looking at a long-term fundamental advancement of AI. We see a lot of progress, rapid progress in the AI industry. But in academia and also research community, what is the opportunity for emerging area that we can contribute to in theoretical, fundamental, momentous architecture, algorithm formulation, particularly in the area of resilience, trust, and neuroscience and data. We all heard about the end of scaling, but what is the next step right now? At Columbia, we also identify AI as one of the university-wide initiative, and engineering school leading AI foundation, fundamental advancement, in collaboration with 17 other schools in all different intellectual disciplines, including social science, arts, journalism, architecture, finance, business, law, policy, environment, health, and public health, so many fields. So in this cross-cutting interdisciplinary effort, there are several themes very synergistic with what we are looking at today and tomorrow in this emerging trend of AI. One is how do we leverage the knowledge and the theory and the foundation from discipline for us to pursue the new foundation of AI. So one of the first theme of today's topic on resilience, trust, cutting across neuroscience and AI is really very aligned with that direction. And second one is how do we use the advances and tool and the new knowledge from AI to help advance other fields. For example, in social science, in policy, in arts and creativity. How do we use AI not only as a prediction tool or modeling tool, but also help us to think about data gathering, data governance, data management, and that's the second theme of today's talk. I know Shafi will have a more beautiful picture and theme thinking about how to frame the discussion today. But I'm just so excited about the topic covered on today's and tomorrow's workshop. Has so much synergy with what we're doing at Columbia, Simon Institute, ARIE, and many other institutions. Our speaker also come from today. Really looking forward to the discussion today. And I'm sure a lot of ideas come up from the productive discussion will help us to make further advancement in the community. Thank you. Looking forward to the event. Thank you. Have a good one.
Me again. So I'm going to tell you something about ARIE that Shih-Fu mentioned. ARIE stands for the Institute for Artificial and Natural Intelligence. So it's one of around 25 AI institutes in the country. And each of the AI institutes is AI plus X. There's an AI in physics, an AI in optimization, AI in farming. And our focus is AI and neuro and cognitive science together. We're just about to start our third year of the Institute, and it's been a really exciting time. In general, the impetus for the Institute for us came from the idea that neuroscience and AI have kind of gone in parallel for many years now, in the sense that there's been some crossover. Things like the idea of a neural network borrows a lot of at least terminology and some concepts from neuroscience, and there's been some transfer the other way as well about AI ideas into neuroscience. And that's gone along somewhat, though, in parallel for several years. But just in the last decade, both areas have really exploded. In neuro and cognitive science, there's all kinds of new recording techniques, the ability, instead of recording from a single cell in an animal, it's gone to thousands and hundreds of thousands of cells at a time. So you really get insight into what's going on in the brain that way, potentially. And on the other side, as everybody knows, in AI, there's been an explosion. These really large models are capable of things that we didn't think were going to be possible, at least in my lifetime. So I was very excited to see all these advances in AI. And now it turns out there's a lot of opportunities for fertilization both ways. Some of the neuroscience ideas about how to understand the brain and analyze it and try to gain some interpretation of it have been borrowed and used and extended in AI, and vice versa. A lot of the methods and models used in AI have been borrowed more in neuroscience and extended in neuroscience. So we think the time is ripe really to try to bring these two fields together. And so ARIE is really about this bidirectional activity of trying to get AI to help neuroscience and cognitive science and vice versa. Now, so let me tell you a little bit about the meetings today. So it was really born from, I spent a lot of the fall term at the Simons in Berkeley, where Shafi Goldwasser, who you'll hear from in a minute, she's been there for several years. She was the director for many years of the Simons Institute for Theoretical Computer Science. And they're master, and she's a master, and they have a lot of these kinds of events where they have a lot of workshops with all kinds of interesting speakers and discussions, and that's what I was there for in the fall. And we had some discussions around organizing something when Shafi was here visiting Columbia at this time. And we came up with these two topics, as Shih-Fu very nicely described. And the idea is that one of them was around robustness and resilience in both AI, which is a big topic in AI in these kinds of systems, as well as in neuroscience, and both of those, and then perhaps trying to gain some, like I was talking about, the kind of cross-fertilization between the two areas. And the second topic was about synthetic data, like how can we get these advanced models to really help us build new methods and increase our understanding of science and of these models themselves by synthesizing data, and how can that be useful both in science and social science as well as in AI. So that's the two topics. We originally were thinking we'd have one day and one the second day, but for various reasons and going along with this theme of kind of cross-fertilization, actually there's some talks on both of them both days. So we're really looking forward to this event, and hope we have some great discussions. There's going to be some panels in both cases in the afternoon today and in the afternoon tomorrow. Okay, so let me turn it over to Shafi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shafi Goldwasser, and I want to first of all thank Columbia University and Dean Shih-Fu Chen for hosting this workshop and hosting me in particular, and also to Rich Zemel, who has been a really perfect partner in organizing this workshop, often supplementing my enthusiasm with some substance. So thank you, Rich. And I would like to acknowledge the support of the Simons Institute for Theory of Computing at Berkeley, and the Resilience Pod, which I will describe in 1 minute, also at the Simons Institute and in the Neuroscience Department at Berkeley. So the Simons Institute was founded around 2012 or 13, and it was due to a very generous gift by the Simons Foundation. And the idea was that we'll bring sort of theory of computing people with people in other adjoining disciplines, including neuroscience and psychology and economics and engineering and mathematics. And it runs essentially as a visiting, essentially hosting visitors, where there's programs every semester on some dedicated topic. There's postdocs, so any of you who are students and thinking of postdoc career, often you can apply to some of these programs if it aligns with your research interests. And I became the director there in 2018, but I haven't been director for about a year. So I just want to acknowledge the support of the Simons Foundation. Now we are being supported by the International Simons Foundation and a lot of other kind of industry and individuals and so forth. So beyond these programs, these semester programs, the Simons Institute also has something called a research pod. There's one in machine learning, one in quantum computing, and a third one, which I'm co-directing with, or just did something to the computer, with Daniela Kaufer, who's going to be the first speaker, is on resilience. It's a 3-year pod, which investigates sort of this whole idea of resilience and robustness in many areas, but mostly the focus right now is on machine learning, computer science, and neuroscience. And Daniela's first talk will be mostly dedicated to that. And I just want to say that in terms going into this workshop, so this whole year was a year dedicated to large language models at Simons, and that's why the first semester Rich was there. And the idea was to essentially see, understand these large language models, which I don't think we do. But it is very clear that we do understand that it provides us a vehicle to study, other fields like linguistics, nature of language. There's a lot of actually talk even about language in other species beyond humans, exploring maybe theories of brain in computation, maybe using these LLMs for experimental tools, and just in general, the nature of human intelligence and cognitive science. And indeed, today's workshop, we've had 8 workshops, I think, during this year at Simons. And yet we haven't examined the topics that we're going to talk about today. So the whole robustness, resilience, there's some talks here about trust and talks about the synthetic data. I think this is really what's coming up these days. And we will talk about it in this workshop. So I'm very enthusiastic about it. In fact, I was telling Rich that I was looking at the agenda again this morning, and I don't think there's a single talk that I have heard it before in one form or another. And that's very unique these days. Okay, now I was given the pleasure to... Oh, I logged myself out. Oh, sorry.